Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to East End Community Housing here at LTV. My name is Michael Daly, and I'd like to introduce you to my co-host. I'm going to refer to my notes, although I know Christina very well. Christina Desanti grew up locally in Montauk and then Sag Harbor as a child, and now has lived in East Hampton since 1994. That's 30 years. Where she met her husband, Rudy. Small business owner for many years, literally one of the few mom and pop local businesses that are left here on the East End today. Christine and her husband own Dreesen's Catering and Dreesen's Donuts, which has been a local iconic product, I know myself, for generations, since Rudy's grandfather's days. They recently sold the catering part of the business, but have been the food purveyor of the Meals on Wheels for years as well. Christina's father-in-law was one of the founders in the 80s, and they've been part of the program ever since. So a great community member, great leader, great contributor, and local business person. So Christine has been aware of the needs of our increasing senior population. She's also part of the sandwich generation as caretaker to her own senior parent and mother to two recent college graduates. Christina spent a decade working in the mortgage industry and then the real estate appraisal business. So she has a bit of real estate knowledge too. Christina has been on the East Hampton School Board of Education for 13 years. 11 of them as vice president, an advocate for bringing back and providing vocational education programs for our students, training for jobs that are in demand in our seasonal resort community, such as culinary arts, automotive, and small engine and boat motor repair. She'd like to see us add a full construction trades program as well at some point with electrical, plumbing, and basic construction classes. These are the trades that dominate a lot of the work that's done out here on the East End. So Christine has participated in several local committees over the years, having been on the East Hampton Village Business Advisory Committee, the East Hampton Village Police Reform Committee, and Fred Thiel's Business Advisory Committee for affordable housing. So I'm very proud and very fortunate to be here with my co-host, Christine Desanti.
Thank you, Michael. I'll introduce you right back.
Okay.
So Michael Daly is Senior Advisor of True North Realty Associates, a firm dedicated to building community through conscious development. TNRA works with municipalities and organizations that are actively engaged in creating community housing for their stakeholders. As a veteran real estate broker, while seeing housing get less attainable for local residents, in 2017 he founded East End YIMBY, a community housing advocacy group. East End YIMBY members successfully led the campaign for passage of the Peconic Bay Community Housing Fund referendum in 2022. And its members also educate residents and advocate for high-quality, affordable dwellings for all people in the 5 East End towns as a matter of conscience and common sense. He is a member of the Long Island Housing Coalition, New York Neighbors, and the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council Housing and Placemaking Working Group. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, that is a mouthful.
And served on the Town of Southampton Zoning Board of Appeals from 2018 to 24. The TOS Community Housing Advisory Committee, Town of Southampton, from 2023 to 24, and the Town of Southampton Anti-Bias Task Force from 2016 to 2024. Michael and his wife, Masail, live in Sag Harbor, are parents to 5 adult children and grandparents to 2 little girls.
Oh, that's great.
And Michael is a wealth of knowledge on this topic. I always wind up calling you and asking you and picking your brain on topics about affordable community housing.
Well, I call you as well when I'm stumped with something. We have a great working relationship, and it's it's just a pleasure to be here with you. This is a little dream that we had. We've been talking about it, right? And Michael Clark helped make it happen
Right.
that we were able to have this show. So
Yeah, huge thank you to LTV, which is
Yeah.
true community programming.
yeah. So tell me about your motivation, or tell all of us about your motivation for doing this show.
I've been seeing the crisis unfold as someone who has been here since I was 3 or 4 years old. So you're seeing it unfold, and I'm seeing it unfold from so many different perspectives. Like you said, as you know, from the school perspective, the parent perspective, because my kids are in the generation that, you know, really are going to struggle to ever be able to stay here in any way, shape, or form. And also, you know, being a senior advocate, that, you know, the seniors also have housing issues. So as I've been watching this unfold and experiencing it on various levels as an employer who, you know, there is no local workforce left. It just kind of inspired me to be a grassroots advocate, and I'm pretty outspoken on the issue, and trying to find common sense solutions and trying to clarify some of the issues. You know, it can be a really contentious issue locally. A lot of people just either don't understand the scope of the issue at this point, or they just have a knee-jerk reaction to what affordable housing or community housing means. So we started using the term community housing because ultimately that is what it is. You know, there are different terms: workforce housing, affordable housing, community housing.
Right.
A lot of people use them interchangeably. I prefer at this point community housing because of
Sure, and our
what
community
that-
housing fund, you know, which is
Right.
the legislation that Fred Thiel worked on for 20 years.
Yeah.
That took 20 years to finally come to referendum.
right.
And now we have a 0.5% cost on tax on buying new homes.
And how do
as a
we put that
result.
money to use is something that the community has been discussing and the town board has been discussing a lot. There's a lot of great ideas floating around, and you know, I've been following like some of the things that they're looking into. And I think some of them are really, you know, great ideas, and but they are confusing. Even like the lottery process is confusing. So I think if we can bring some clarity to some of that and dispel some of the, you know, the negativity around the issue,
The
because
myths.
this crisis is just beginning, in my opinion. You know, I mentioned to you before, we have an aging workforce out here. And if we do not have any young workers to backfill that as they leave, this crisis is getting, you know, way worse than what we're seeing already. So I think that we really, you know, if we start today, we're still not catching up. So if we spend a lot of time, you know, arguing over decisions and you know, placing blame, who should have started 20 years ago, we should have been talking about this. We're here where we are now, and there are some really creative solutions being, you know, bandied about. So, I mean, I know I'd like to hear more about them.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more about the ADUs, recent grant changes that might make that more palatable to people, to add an accessory dwelling unit to your own home. There are some changes recently that the town made for senior housing with the
East Hampton
density.
town, yes.
Right, East Hampton town did, with increasing the density allowed. So I know I'm trying to have Kathy Burns come on and talk about
That
that.
would be great.
Because they already are planning on, you know, their next steps, if you can add to existing housing units and add a little bit more. You know, so if they're taking a look at that. There are ideas being bandied about how do you supplement down payments for first-time home buyers.
Right.
What are some of the other things that are being said? The rent
There's-
supplement, if you know, if there's a possibility from other communities that are already doing this, of supplementing rents for landlords who will pull everything back off of the Airbnb,
Right.
seasonal, you know, 2-week rentals, and rent year-round. You know, there's a cost to that. So there are lots of really creative ideas floating around all different resort communities, because we're not the only one. experiencing this.
Incentives.
Right.
Incentives for people to do the right thing,
Right.
Because when it comes to housing, common sense is not that common,
No.
right? Housing has
It's changed
been
so much.
it's gone from, and I think Kathy Burke Gonzalez said this, or one of the town board members, is we've gone from housing being about community to housing being a commodity.
Right.
And there are so many people who are very house rich right now. And they're really concerned about anything happening that might have an impact on that value.
Right.
And I'm a homeowner. I'm
Right.
fortunate to have just celebrated 20 years in my home in Sag Harbor. And it's a modest home, but it's mine, and I love it.
Right.
And so we tend to want to be protective of that.
Right.
Just like the definition of an environmentalist, a cynical definition of an environmentalist is anybody who bought a house yesterday becomes an environmentalist. I'm in, close the gate.
Right.
Nobody. I bought an old piece of farmland, but nobody else can live on any more farmland. It's unfortunately, again, common sense is not that common, and human nature.
Right.
It can be kind or it can be cruel.
Right.
Yeah.
I think looking at it from a school board member perspective, the worst part about looking at this crisis unfolding is looking at the next generation who are starting to figure out on their own now that, 80 to 90% of them, as it stands right now, are not going to be able to afford to live here.
Yeah.
Unless you have a trust fund, or you walk into, a really great $250,000 a year job. Our highest paid administrators at the school, they cannot afford what houses are going for here.
Yeah.
So everyone from your bus drivers, your cafeteria workers, your clerical, your paraprofessionals, your teachers, your school psychologists, your school nurses.
Sure.
No one anymore, if they're not here and don't already have established housing, they can't come here. And the hospital's experiencing the same thing. Doctors cannot afford to live here. So, something has to be done. And we sort of spend a lot of time in the weeds arguing why things shouldn't be done.
Sure.
When we really need to be starting to talk about, things that will have the least negative impact, but something has to be done. And if you start right now, if we keep putting it off, this crisis is only accelerating since the pandemic.
Yeah.
I can't believe, I could not afford to buy my own house right now.
Sure, either could I.
Right?
No, either could I, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I did a small study, and I mentioned it in another show, but out of 1,100 homes on the market approximately today, only 60 of them are offered at under $1 million.
Right.
And the majority of them are between 900,000 and $1 million. So, you have to
And
make
now,
175
how about rent?
to 200,000.
Average rental, a
Yeah.
few years ago, the real estate agents that I knew were saying, you couldn't touch anything for rent under $5,000. Then it was $5,500. Now it seems like the going rate is $6,000 for a house.
Well, there are some rentals, I'll tell you anecdotally, some of the rental prices are coming down since the pandemic, and since more of the Airbnbs are not being Airbnb'd, the demand for Airbnbs has dropped significantly, and some of them are being converted into rentals. But the age-old problem that we've had for generations in this market is a lot of people only want to do them as winter rentals.
Right.
So, you may be charged $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 a month, depending on the size and the location in the winter, but then they want you to pay $20,000, $25,000 for the summer.
Right.
And that just doesn't work. That's what results in
And a lot of
young
people are just leaving it,
families.
right, they're leaving
Right.
it empty the year and just doing the summer, thinking it's less wear and tear and.
Some people, camp in the summer.
Right.
And listen, the money is powerful and the
Yes.
love of money is dangerous. But I know some parents who kick their own kids out of their house in the summer to be able to rent it and get that money because it helps
Right.
them cover their annual expenses.
Right.
You know what I mean? If I can make $30,000-$40,000 in a summer to
Right.
cover our heat and electricity and everything, I'm gonna do it. So Junior, hit the
Right.
road. Go hang out with some of your friends and
I mean,
that's
honestly,
a
I think
cultural
probably
thing out
about
here.
half of my peers rent their house every summer.
Sure.
You
And
know,
they figure out
I
what
mean,
they're
I've done
going
it
to
a number
do.
of times just for the summer, and you go stay with family and
Stay with family or
Right.
travel or
Right.
go on a big long trip or
right.
yeah.
But that's how a lot of people out here are actually getting
Make ends
by.
meet.
Right. But that's if it's your primary residence and you're getting out and you're doing that. But there are also people who do have houses available that are empty most of the year, but they're
That's
going
another
for the least wear and tear and the most money.
Sure.
And so how do you incentivize those people to come back and put it on the market for year round and rent it to local families? And how do you do that where it's affordable for the local families? Like I know a couple of local families that are two professionals and they make decent money, but they can't afford more than $3,000 a month in rent.
Right.
And the average rent is $6,000. So if you can do something with a rent subsidy where they can pay the difference with some of that money and that would be helpful in the short term to stem some of the tide of people
Sure.
leaving.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of folks that I know right now that are sort of housing insecure, I guess would maybe be the term, that are, that have had stable housing all of their adult lives, raising their children.
Yes.
And now they lost their long-term rentals. Or they've lost one rental after another. And, God help you if you get divorced and you sell your house and you have two
Oh my gosh.
looking. I mean, it's just impossible. It's an impossible situation. And so what do? You leave the area. You
You do.
And this is where most of our friends and family are leaving the area.
Being in the real estate field over the years, I've been a real estate broker now for 26 years. I can't tell you how many people have called me and said, Michael, my brother is living on the couch. He's killing our marriage. If I don't get him out of here soon, or my sister, or my sister
Right.
and her kids are staying in the house, and it's intolerable. I mean, extended family living when it's intentional is a
Right.
beautiful thing, but when it's unintentional, when it's out of need, it can be really,
Right.
really difficult. So, well, let me tell you about what motivated me to do this show. First of all, the fact that you and I get along so great, and we think and talk about all of these issues so much, and we're on the same page, and we know a lot of people. So my thought was that we want to bring solutions to the table, and we want to bring ways that we can have more community housing without changing our neighborhoods,
Right.
without doing it in terms of architecture that's similar to what's going on, ways that are not going to dramatically alter our communities. And over the last 10 years at least, I've been doing a lot of research from other resort communities
Right.
on what's been working for them. Because every resort community in the United States, if not the world, is having a lot of the same challenges we have. And we've known it since the 80s. I mean, I've done some research on old master plans for the town of Southampton. And even in 1980, they said there is a need for affordable housing for local people that we will need to focus on.
Right.
Now, saying that in a master plan and doing it are two
Right.
very different things, because we just haven't done it until recent years when East Hampton has really taken the lead.
Well, I
But-
think also there's so much, it's so contentious in some areas, and so there are so many people that are knee-jerk reaction is, they don't want to hear anything about it. So if you 20 years ago, I'm going to defend some of the local politicians right now,
Okay.
because 20 or 30 years ago, we knew that there was kind of a crisis coming. It was always expensive out here. You saw it coming. But imagine back then if they had proposed more affordable housing. and everybody would have said, this isn't a crisis, Now we have an actual crisis, and people are still really resistant in some pockets to it. So it would have been, I think, impossible to really get done. So I think we're here now, and for better or for worse, if we don't do whatever we do now is still going to take a while.
And in the meantime, years.
Yeah, it's a crisis. We're bleeding out local people by the day. People are just packing up and leaving. Schools are forecasting a decline in enrollment because of it. And everyone who leaves, when we ask them, they're moving somewhere that they can afford to live.
Businesses are shutting down because they can't find employees, or they're restricting their hours.
Right.
We talked about Sag Harbor, which used to be open from 9 a.m. until 11 p.m. over the years.
Right.
Now most of the businesses closed there except for the restaurants.
Right.
And some of the restaurants that used to offer lunch and dinner only offer lunch. Only offer lunch or only offer dinner on certain days, or are now closed a couple of days a week because they can't get the staffing to do it.
Right.
Let me share a couple of solutions and we can take a show and talk about any one or two of these solutions as we move forward. Accessory dwelling units.
Yes.
Okay, there's some state programs that are now available, and the towns of Southampton, East Hampton, Shelter Island, and Southold are all enrolled in ADU programs called ADU +1.
Right.
We'll delve into more of that in another show.
Yeah.
Short-term rentals. Should they be allowed? What are some of the solutions that we can put in place that still allow them, but not in the wide use that we found during the pandemic?
And encourage more year-round.
Shared equity. That's where some of the funds could be used in the Community Housing Fund for shared equity with some local people. Integrated supportive housing, teacher housing, workforce housing, firefighter and EMT housing, healthcare housing, seasonal workforce housing, senior housing, and missing middle housing. And I'd like to do one whole show on missing middle housing in the near future.
Explain what that is.
Missing middle housing is gentle density housing that is very much like the type of housing that we used to build in the 40s and 50s before zoning, came in and started strangling everything. Missing middle housing is like the housing that lines Main Street in Southampton, in Sag Harbor, and Southampton too. It's like the housing that lines Main Street here, only the upper floors are not used for housing, with retail below.
Right.
It's two-family housing. It's a manor home that looks like a single-family home, but it has 4 apartments in it. So missing middle housing is a real great solution for us in a way that doesn't change the character of our neighborhood.
Right.
I always say the character of our neighborhood includes the characters who live in our neighborhood, right? So we're kicking out the characters in our neighborhood in order to protect the character of our neighborhood.
Focus on people, not just the problems.
People, we focus on the ducks, and you'll get 1,000 people or 100 people to show up to protect the ducks, right, from plastic straws.
Right.
But when it comes to community housing, those same 100 people show up against it.
Right.
And my way of seeing things is that human life is at least as valuable as wildlife, right? So we need to protect our human infrastructure as well. Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize just how important that human infrastructure is and how many people it takes to make a community function and thrive. And that's the problem. And we can't lose that. It's not just the workforce. It's, everything. Our seniors and our,
Yeah.
there are certain services that we, are going to require. I think the crisis impacts all of us, even if we don't all see it firsthand. At some point we all are going to. And I think if we can have guests that bring information and clarity, and can explain these things, explain the lotteries and, the different changes. I think information is good, And so that's what I hope to get out of it.
Solutions.
And I also hope to hear from people, if anybody wants to be interviewed, who it's impacting directly, you know, who are in the affordable housing or have been trying to get into affordable housing, or who are just moving from rental to rental to rental. So I want it to be, you know, to hear from those people too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we'd like to make it primarily solution-based because we've been talking,
Right.
commiserating for years.
Right.
And it's time to stop talking. And a lot of the talking has been very, very negative
Right.
as well on it because people have these myths of, that's one of the classes that I've offered is the 9 myths of affordable
Right.
housing, you know.
We
and
can
when it
do one
comes to
entire show
traffic, right,
dedicated just to that. So,
traffic, the environment, you know,
Right.
Homes are being built green, so all that kind of stuff. But
Right.
in the past, at a lot of our meetings, we've seen that there's been so much negative
Right.
energy, and on social media too.
And it's often
And-
misinformation.
And it's often
So,
misinformation. So we have a slide, I think, that we want to end with today
Okay.
that is
Yeah, we have
from
1 minute left.
Mary Ann Williamson that I've shared many times on our social media, and that is, you know, hate has talked so loudly for so long, greed has talked so loudly for so long, liars have talked so loudly for so long. Love has got to stop whispering. So let's share the love on this program with our community.
Positivity and positive solutions.
Yeah, and let's keep it rolling. So I look forward to being here with you,
Yeah.
partner. All
Me
right.
too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
We hope you tune in.